Hey, what's up everyone and welcome. Today I'm going to be showing you how to catch flounder. Flounder are found all up and down the East Coast. If you have access to some cheap tackle and a beach or an inlet, that's all you need. You're ready to go. So without further ado, I'll show you what I'm using today. This is a 1 ounce jig, okay? I might use a 3/4 ounce jig depending on the tide. I'll go into that further later. And to attach this jig to my line, I've tied a double surgeon's knot here. I'm going to be posting some videos later on how to tie all these knots. And then about a foot up from that jig, I have a T-knot, okay? So that's a T-knot right there. And just a single size 3 hook hanging off that T-knot. And attached to both this hook and the jig, I'm just going to use a single white 3-inch swimming mullet Berkeley gulp. Okay, so the Berkeley gulp just goes over the hook like that. It'll be hanging off like that. And then on the jig, same thing. You're just gonna thread the hook through the Berkeley gulp, thread it around, and have the tail hanging off. So one thing to keep in mind with these jigs, if you're using the bucktail, sometimes the hair gets really long, so I trim a little bit off, just so that when my gulp is on there, the tail's hanging off, because you want that tail fluttering in the water. All right, so that's it. Let's head down to the jetty. Let's see if we can catch anything. Okay, I'm here at the jetty. I'm walking up the rocks. The tide is moving from my right to my left. So I'm casting up the tide to the right, and I'm letting the tide just take my bait down to the left. And as my bait is bouncing along the bottom, I'm giving it a couple of jigs, just giving it some motion, and then letting it sink back down to the bottom. And the key here is flounder lay flat on the bottom, and they wait to attack their prey. So you want to make sure you're on the bottom or close to the bottom. So you got to find the balance between giving it some jigs, giving it some movement, but also staying close to the bottom. So each time you jig it, you're bringing it up off the bottom. And then after you jig it, you want to pause and just let it sink back down to the bottom. The great thing about fishing for flounder is they're pretty easy to catch. They're not very finicky. So if you feel a couple bites, don't be afraid to try to set the hook. And if you don't hook the fish, just let your line back down, and 9 times out of 10, the flounder will come back and bite again. That said, you have to be very patient with these fish, because they'll just kind of bite, nibble, 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 and they'll kind of mouth the bait for a while before they actually bite it hard enough to get hooked. So especially here, this is a heavily fished area. I'm in South New Jersey, and most of these fish are on the smaller side. So when I get a bite, I'm just leaving my line, not doing anything, and I'm waiting for these fish to continue biting until they eventually hook themselves. So I'll speed this up here as my line continues to work its way to the left. One thing I should note is I did switch up my rig a bit. I went down to the 3/4 ounce jig as the tide was pretty gentle right now, and 1 ounce was just too heavy. So the goal is to use the lightest weight possible that still gets you down to the bottom. I also switched to the Berkeley shrimp on my top hook instead of the swimming mullet, so I'll provide a link to all of my tackle below. You see I just caught a crab there. We'll continue to let this play out until the action picks up a little bit. So as you'll see, lots of repetition here. Just continuing to cast up the current, up to the right, letting it drift down to the left, and giving it some jigging action every now and then in between. And the type of jigging that I'm doing is just small, rapid jigs.
sporadically, and then as you see, I'll just wait and let it sink back down to the bottom and bounce along the bottom of the ocean. If you can, it's good to move around. I like to cover lots of ground, walk up and down the jetty if you're on the jetty. If you're on a beach, keep walking, keep trying new spots, and then if you start getting bites, stay there, because oftentimes where there's one flounder, there's going to be more.
Getting bites, I'm just giving him a long time because this flounder will just kind of play with it and mouth it. There he is. Oh, there he is.
Okay, one down. Let's see if we can catch any others. You'll see that first one hit that Berkeley shrimp. And one thing to keep in mind, once you hook a flounder, keep that tip up and make sure your line stays tight. You never want slack on the line because that can allow the fish to get off. So you'll see here, I hook another one. I try to keep that tip up and keep my line tight the entire time.
Feels like a decent one. Oh, not bad.
Alright guys, that's it for the day. I'll leave you with an image of the rig I was using for most of the night. And one picture of a nicer one that I caught, of course, after the battery died on my camera. But if you enjoyed this video, please hit subscribe. Feel free to comment below with any questions, tips, fish stories, anything else. And hope to see you next time. Thanks.